Hello everyone. Today we continue following the next chapter in the emotional and challenging journey of the single mother, Dieu Han. After leaving Mr. Qin's house, Dieu Han walked like a soul adrift. Her mind was tangled with a whirlwind of emotions, shock, anger, and an unspeakable sense of pity. She had just uncovered a painful truth. Mr. Qin, the man who once gave her guidance, who once welcomed her into his home for a warm cup of tea, was in fact the very stepfather from whom Uyan had once run away. A man with two faces, and now Uyan had completely vanished. No one knew where she was, whether she was alive or something worse. A powerful wave of anxiety surged through Han's chest. She couldn't allow herself to sit still. Beside her, Tan remained a quiet but unwavering presence. He knew things were far from simple, but the determination in Han's eyes, her unyielding spirit, gave him no choice but to stand by her. Their resolve was like a small flame in the night, fragile yet impossible to extinguish. At the same time, the local police had stepped up their investigation. After taking Han's testimony, they began to take stronger actions, not only digging deeper into the robbery incident, but also expanding their scope to include the case of Uyan's disappearance. The name Fuch, the leader of the gang that attacked Han, had now come under the police's radar. Fuch knew he couldn't run forever. He was hiding in an overgrown field, deep within a narrow alleyway. Fear had wrapped around him like a chain. He didn't dare to show his face in public. The police had begun canvassing every area he'd ever visited, tracing every contact, every phone call. Fuch was scared, but the question remains, was he the final piece of the puzzle, or merely a pawn in a much bigger, darker game? That night, unable to rest amid the growing signs of something wrong, Tan decided to take action on his own. He pulled a mask tightly over his face and wore an old jacket to avoid being recognized. The night was eerily quiet. Tan stood silently outside Mr. Qin's gate, his eyes scanning every movement inside the house with intense suspicion. He crept along the fence, careful not to make a sound. Each step was heavy with tension. Mr. Qin's house, though old, had many hidden corners. Tan carefully made his way through each part of the yard, down narrow hallways, weaving through shadows. Finally, he reached one side of the house where a window looked into the interior. He tiptoed closer and peered through the first window. The room inside was empty, just a dusty bed and a few neatly folded old clothes in the corner. He moved on to the second window, where a dim light leaked out from beneath the curtain. Just as his hand touched the window frame, whack! A broom slammed hard into his back, sending a jolt of pain through him. Before he could react, an older woman wielding the broom was already shouting, as if she had just caught a thief in the act. She was none other than Mrs. Qin Ong, Mr. Qin's wife, and someone Tan had never met before. Startled, Tan raised his arms to shield his head, hastily explaining, "I'm not a thief. I'm a friend of Han and Uyan. I'm looking for Uyan." But Mrs. Qin Kong Tin Ong Ai. Her eyes were full of suspicion and fury. "You're a total stranger, sneaking around my house like that? I'm Uyan's mother. What kind of friend behaves like you?" Her words hit Tan like a bolt of lightning. "You're Uyan's mother? Do you know that Uyan has gone missing?" That question made her freeze. Her eyes blinked rapidly. Her face turned pale in an instant. "Me missing? What did you say?" The air went still for a few seconds. Mrs. Qin slowly lowered the broom. Her eyes welled with tears. Her lips trembled as if she had lost her bearings. At last, she softened and motioned for Than to come inside. "All right, come in. Let's talk properly." Inside the silent house, only the wind howled through the cracks in the doors. Mrs. Chin led Than in, forcing him to sit on the wooden chair in the center of the living room. She no longer held the broom, but her calloused hand gripped his wrist tightly, as if letting go would cause him to vanish. Than panted heavily, trying to stay calm. Slowly, he began to explain. "Last night, I went to Uyen's house. The door wasn't locked, but the place was in chaos. Things were scattered everywhere, like someone had broken in. Uyen was nowhere to be found. There were no signs she had left voluntarily. Han and I searched everywhere. Then we realized someone had attacked Han, possibly from the same group." At that, Mrs. Chin squeezed his wrist tighter, her face paling, but she forced herself to stay composed and asked, "Kidnapping? My daughter's dirt poor. Who would bother kidnapping her? Or are you just making this up to swindle money from me?" Startled, Than shook his head vigorously. "No, not at all, ma'am, I swear. Han and I truly care about Uyen. If we didn't, I wouldn't have risked sneaking into your house in the middle of the night like this. We don't want money. I just need to know where Uyen is, and whether Mr. Chin might be involved." At the mention of that name, the atmosphere in the room turned cold. Mrs. Chin tilted her head, eyeing Than, not with anger this time, but caution. "You think he's involved in this? I just want to find the truth. I heard that Uyen had serious conflicts with her stepfather in the past." Mrs. Chin Kong Traloy. Instead, she shot up from her seat, her expression hardening. Then she yelled, "Ong Chin, come out here. Someone's here to accuse you." The door to the inner room burst open. Mr. Chin stepped out, his eyes still red and puffy like he'd just woken from a nap. But the moment he saw Than, the same man who had appeared with Han during the previous confrontation, his expression changed instantly. "You again? You've come back to stir up trouble, haven't you?" Before Than could say a word, Mr. Chin stormed out onto the porch, grabbed a large wooden stick propped by the door, and charged toward him. Terrified, Than jumped up and backed away. Though he didn't want to fight back, the sudden attack left him with no choice. He bolted through the front door and ran for his life. Than burst out of the house, his heart pounding like a drum. After narrowly escaping Mr. Chin's wrath, he still couldn't calm down. He just kept running on and on until he reached the end of a wide alley where he finally dared to stop. Just then, an old motorbike rolled up, its engine sputtering and coughing like it might die any second. Than hesitated for a moment, then quickly seized the opportunity. "Get me out of this area. The farther, the better. Hurry." The young man riding the bike shrugged, seemingly indifferent, but still pulled over. Than jumped on the back, barely gripping the seat as the bike roared forward, leaving behind a trail of dust and flickering lights. They sped through several alleys and bumpy dirt roads before arriving at a deserted, empty lot. The driver stopped the bike without a word and looked back over his shoulder. "We're here. Get off." Than H nodded and quickly jumped down. "Thanks a lot." He turned to leave, but suddenly the driver's gruff voice cut through the air. Hey, a thank you is easy. What about gas money, my fee?" Than, surprised, dug through his pockets only one 50,000 VND note left. He held it out. "This is all I've got." The man glanced at the money, face darkening. 50? You kidding me? Tension thickened. Than frowned. I'm not joking. That's really all I have. What kind of attitude is that? The man stepped off the bike and pulled down his face mask. Tha, about to turn away, froze in shock. Their eyes met. Both stood still, stunned. Phuc? Tha, is that you? The air froze instantly. Under the faint yellow glow of a distant street lamp, his face became unmistakable, an old scar on his left cheek, sharp, cold eyes, and a menacing half-smile. Phuc stepped slowly toward Than. So, you're the one sticking your nose into this. Her precious friend, huh? Than stepped back. I don't care what you're hiding, but if anything happens to Uyen, we won't let you get away with it. Phuc let out a mocking laugh. You think you can stop me? Without another word, she turned and opened his bike's storage compartment. Than instantly grew wary. Just as he feared, Phuc pulled out a hammer. Not waiting another second, Than spun around and took off running at full speed. Phuc's furious scream rang out behind him. Where you running to, huh? Come back here. Behind him, Phuc was close on his heels, swinging the hammer, shouting curses with every step. After the breathless chase, Than quickly hid behind a large, moss-covered concrete pillar. He pressed his back against the rough surface, his hand clutched to his chest, trying to calm his racing heartbeat. Phuc's footsteps were still pounding nearby, quick, aggressive. Than bit his lip, forcing himself to breathe as silently as possible. Then silence. Phuc had stopped. He scanned the surroundings, his eyes darting in every direction. The wind rustled the tall grass around him, adding to his growing frustration. Not seeing Than anywhere, he clenched his teeth and growled under his breath. You bastard good at hiding, huh? But you won't get away for long. After a few more tense moments, Phuc lost patience and walked off, his figure disappearing into the shadows. Only when Than was certain Phuc had left, did he dare to lift his head and exhale a long, shaky breath. Without wasting a second, Than slipped back to where Phuc had left his motorbike. Luckily, in his haste, Phuc had forgotten to lock the handlebar. Than pushed the bike into a thick patch of grass and hid it as best he could. Though he couldn't keep any hard evidence for now, at least he could prevent Phuc from using the bike to escape or cause more trouble. Not wasting any more time, Than sprinted toward his car. He had parked it earlier at the edge of the area as a precaution. He jumped in, locked the doors, secured the steering wheel, and pulled out his phone. His hands were still shaking, but he knew he had to call someone who could help. Than dialed Huang's number. Do you know anyone at the local police station? Call them for me right now, it's urgent. On the other end, Huang gasped. What? You actually ran into Phuc? Okay, I'll call the cops right away. Then nodded, muttered a rushed thank you, then hung up. Meanwhile, back at the old motel, Hun stood by the window, the yellow light casting shadows on her anxious face. Over an hour had passed since Than called to say he was going out to investigate, and still no news. The fear was creeping in, not just for Than's safety, but for something deeper. The terrifying thought that the only person brave enough to stand with her and Uyen might be silenced. She didn't know where Uyen was now, but something inside her whispered, Uyen needs you. You can't give up. At last, what seemed like an inescapable danger had passed temporarily. Than was safe. But the trail leading to Uyen had once again vanished into the fog. And the question that now loomed, would Thun and Hun have enough time to uncover the truth before someone else got hurt?
Thành gật đầu, nói cảm ơn trong vội vã, rồi vội vàng cúp máy. Trong khi đó, tại nhà trọ cũ kỹ, Thân đứng bên cửa sổ, ánh đèn vàng hắt lên khuôn mặt lo âu. Đã hơn 1 giờ trôi qua kể từ lúc Thành gọi báo đi điều tra, nhưng vẫn chưa có tin gì. Nỗi sợ hãi bắt đầu dâng lên, không phải chỉ vì Thành đang liều mình, mà còn vì Hân sợ rằng người duy nhất dám đứng bên phía cô và Uyên có thể sẽ bị bịt miệng. Giờ đây, Hân không biết Uyên đang ở đâu, nhưng cô cảm nhận được Uyên đang cần cô. Cô nhất định không được từ bỏ. Cuối cùng, sự tưởng chừng như không thể thoát đã tạm lắng. Thành đã an toàn, nhưng manh mối về Uyên lại tiếp tục bị phủ màn sương mù. Và liệu Thành cùng Hân có đủ thời gian để tìm ra chân lý trước khi một ai đó bị hãm hại tiếp theo?